Okay, I'm online. I don't know if anyone can hear me.
Online, I don't know if anyone
Okay, they can.
Online, I don't know if anyone can. Online, I don't know if anyone can.
Okay. I think the sound works. In about 45 seconds, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself and start the video. I had trouble with my audio on my end earlier at my scheduled time of 4, so we're going to try to do this at starting at 6, just a little bit. I'm going to start right at the top of the hour, and we'll go from there. So, thanks. Okay, it's 6 o'clock, and I'm going to start now. I'm Kwiatkowski, and I appreciate having the opportunity to participate in the unconference, and I think it's just what I've seen of it so far. The weekend, it's been great. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and unfortunately read my speech. I'm kind of tied to the paper, and then after that, it'll take about 20 minutes. We'll go to the chat, and I hope you'll have questions and comments, and we can continue the conversation. Okay. The title of the talk is "Can We Be Free in an Unfree World?" Stefan Molyneux, a well-known anarchist, gave a great talk last year where he pointed out that the enforcement of the state does not come from the state. It comes horizontally from the mass of the people who have been cultured to believe the storyline of vertical state control. He calls this the genius of the state. He calls these enforcers slaves, enforcing their own slavery. The genius of the state is that it gets us to voluntarily, without pay, to stand up for it and to deter, damn, and defriend not just the people who challenge its presumed authority, but to heartily reject both ideas and factual information that challenge the state's facade of moral certitude and its mask of justness. Etienne de la Boétie, namesake for our conference this weekend, observed the same thing in the 1500s, and he wrote about it in his Discourse on Voluntary Servitude. He points out that the governing system rests and rises only on the consent of otherwise free people. The slave citizens voluntarily serve the state and willingly consent to the order and the orders of the state. Of course, part of the reason we give our consent is that we fear being jailed, hung, shot, beheaded, losing our property, our families, or our physical freedom at the hand of an angry or disappointed state. In some ways, this fear of rejection and isolation is logical. We consciously or subconsciously decide to trade our consent for continued life as we know it. It has pretty much always been this way. In fact, in ancient and not so ancient eras and civilizations, the structure and implementation of slavery has relied on cultural acceptance for its longevity. When and only when slavery became distasteful, culturally unpopular, and economically expensive, the states altered their laws, following the evolving values of the people. The evolution and de-evolution of many social norms and values seems to follow the same path. Homeopathy was rejected by many in the late 1800s, not only because of the trends in medicine, but by an increasingly prosperous society who bought into the idea that health you purchase medically is automatically better than health as a result of personal action and natural remedies. The state was a tool of the AMA and medical schools, and the consumption demands of the striving classes also suited state tax harvesting. That the state and pharmaceutical industry today cling tightly to their state-based advantages in the face of an increasing consumer dissatisfaction with non-holistic health care is to be expected, and it is a sign that, again, the billions of health decisions made by millions of individual people will eventually lead the way. It brings to mind the adage of the statesman or politician who says, "I must hurry, for there go my people, and I am their leader." Indeed, it is how every vertical institution of power must operate. There are many reasons to be concerned about the state of liberty in the early 21st century. In a global sense, information freedom and technology have unleashed new paradigms. The paradigms are very different for states than for individuals. States everywhere actively seek to control, to surveil and to monitor, to manage their populations and the property and movements of people. On the other hand, individuals and their extended networks are strengthened, educated, motivated, and excited by the possibility of liberty. They are empowered as individuals in realizing liberty in their life, in their work. And curiously, while states are expensive to maintain, fiat money is continually inflated, and food and fuel prices have risen, the technology of communication for the mass of people are affordable. Liberty is within reach for most people in the world today. This is what we are seeing in North Africa and the Middle East today, and within all of the statist regimes of China and India. Only in North Korea, where food and maintenance of the state are so dear, and communication technology so inaccessible, do we have perhaps a sense of near-term hopelessness. But even in North Korea, we don't know for sure what sparks of liberty lay dormant or smoldering, and these sparks are hard to extinguish in real life. They are part of being human. Americans tend to assume that the United States is on top of the freedom pig pile. It sounds like a good place to be, but the facts are very different. The Heritage Foundation currently ranks the United States as having the 9th freest economy, but it shares its 77% rating with Bahrain and Chile. So being 9th may not be all it's cracked up to be. Just this week, a Cato economist interviewed another economist and author, Dambisa Moyo. They spent a lot of time discussing how the 35% corporate tax rate in the United States is 10 percentage points higher than that in socialistic Denmark, which, by the way, was determined to be more economically free than the United States. The U.S. has the highest state incarceration rate on the planet. It is difficult these days to travel within the United States, at least by air. To leave and to return to the country requires a great deal of paperwork, planning, and wasted time, and all in the name of state security. There's an old piece of paper, sometimes known as the law of the land or the Constitution, that explicitly says the government will not constrain or limit our ability to assemble, to speak, to write, to publish, to own and bear arms, to receive fair trials, not to be tortured, and to be secure in our persons and properties and papers. Yet we live in a country with free speech zones, permits required to march or demonstrate, state documentation and approval to own and bear arms, etc., etc. 90 to 95% of the people charged with a crime in this country never see the inside of a courtroom, much less a jury of their peers. As charges multiply based on tens of thousands of pages of laws to be broken, juries and judges lean predictably on the side of the state, not truth, and plea bargains become the popular solution, if unjust, expensive, and immoral. The more the state proclaims American freedom, the more it lies, or at least ignores facts on the ground. Linguistics is key, perhaps. Noam Chomsky's background prepared him for understanding this misuse of language, just as Eric Blair's experience as a British apparatchik in Burma and elsewhere prepared him for creating and explaining newspeak, as George Orwell, the dystopian novelist. You and I are also here because what the state says doesn't match reality. Google Labs has an analytical app for published books called the Ngram Viewer. You can use it to check a phrase or word for frequency of usage in published books all the way back to the 1800s. The word liberty has drastically and steadily fallen out of favor after a high point in 1800, while the word freedom has seen its popularity spike in the war years of the 1940s and the 1960s. Is there a difference between liberty and freedom? There might be. Liberty seems to stand on its own, a condition of being free to choose, to act, to move, and to think. Freedom is also a condition, but it is more associated with what might be allowed or granted. One of the definitions of freedom is a country's right to self-rule, whereas liberty is more closely associated with the individual's right to choice and action. As the 20th century has been the century of nationalism, of the rise of the state, and not unrelated, record-setting democide, the murder of human beings by the state, it is logical that we would talk about freedom, but give short shrift to fundamental liberty. So what we have today, here in the United States and around the world, is technology and information availability that feeds and informs the ideas of liberty and human freedom, coexistent with a massive national and global state apparatus that uses the same technology to indoctrinate and to encourage large groups of people to consent and conform to that state. Love of liberty and trust in decentralization, in peace, in our fellow man is spreading, even as the state uses the same technological world to centralize operations, consolidate fear, spread fear, promote statism, and facilitate social atomization, such that community and family ties are weakened and less influential. There is a contrarian view of the whole phenomenon of WikiLeaks that speaks to this dual-edged technology. WikiLeaks' actions, using technology to make government more transparent, has actually given the state strengthened enthusiasm for restricting information sharing between agencies of government, between countries, and between people. How then, all of this points circumstantially to the war waged by the state, day in and day out, on human liberty. It is a war that is waged politically, technologically, economically, and even linguistically. How then can we live free in this environment? Do we push back directly or use a jiu-jitsu feint? Do we try and change the politics, the technology, the economics, and the language of the state to produce a more decentralized and liberty-tolerating and even liberty-promoting system? Do we stand up parallel alternative systems and participate only in those spheres? Do we ignore the problem and just live our lives? The answer, I believe, is yes. But before I discuss some specifics and answer some of your questions, I want to talk about how we each already live our lives contrary to social norms and political guidelines. When we look at ourselves, we can identify habits of thought and action that already exhibit the kinds of independence and uniqueness that are the seeds of living free. To really think about this topic philosophically, one can read Harry Brown's book, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. And there are many other sources for how to liberate your thinking and your life, and many people here have already explored and enjoyed works by writers and philosophers like Ayn Rand, to Richard Bach, Scott Peck, many more. There's a lot out there on how to liberate ourselves mentally, physically, creatively, and emotionally. But I'm pretty lazy, and sometimes I really don't want to have to work that hard. Instead, if we might consider the fundamental ways we already interact with the world, we might be able to simply emphasize the personal approaches to the world that we already embrace, and just tweak them, just a little, towards liberty and against the state. A new book was published this spring called Why Liberty, and it's edited by Mark Gutman up in Connecticut. It contains the stories of how 54 people from around the world and from all walks of life discovered liberty and embraced peace and freedom in their lives. One review of the book by one of the contributors, economist Arnold Kling, points out that a common trait in all of the contributors was a willingness to go one's own way politically. He brought up the role of personality and the so-called Big Five personality traits. Okay, if you don't know, I didn't. These traits are defined as openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Kling suggested that libertarians were, as a group, low on agreeableness, especially when it comes to politics. Agreeableness is defined as a tendency to be compassionate and cooperative rather than suspicious and antagonistic. Kling could be correct in this, but I would suggest that libertarians are just as likely to be high in the trait of openness, and they are probably very low in the trait of neuroticism. Openness to new ideas and interpretations beyond standard state-published pablum for how things work, and especially how state and society works, would be a trait that would lead one to question the state. And questioning the state is extremely powerful. It doesn't take a majority of people to ask the right questions for real change and for societal paradigm shifts to occur. When a person is persistently or strongly demonstrating the trait of neuroticism, it is seen as a fear-driven behavior. Wikipedia says those who score high in neuroticism are likely to interpret ordinary situations as threatening and minor frustrations as hopelessly difficult. On the other hand, those who are low in neuroticism are said to be less easily upset and are less emotionally reactive. They tend to be calm, emotionally stable, and free from persistent negative feelings. One might translate this as optimism and pessimism. Rothbardians, anarcho-capitalists, and anarcho-libertarians, anti-staters of all flavors, tend to be cheerful, enjoy humor, and they are optimists in the long run, even as we are usually sharply pessimistic over the short run. A more general indication of having that desirable low score in the trait of neuroticism is simply self-confidence. To live free means that you have accepted the truth about human liberty, not just that it is something people of all ages want and enjoy, but that free societies are truly better than unfree societies. To the extent that liberty is present in society, we see self-organizing, self-moderating, highly productive, and correspondingly generous, compassionate, and fundamentally peaceful people. Real freedom to think, live, move, produce, and trade pushes human beings to be active rather than passive, because being active in mind and body is rewarded, and being passive in mind and body is less rewarded. Free societies tend to value all of its members, be they young or old, male or female. In a free society, personal biases and beliefs, subcultures, native languages, or accents are not viewed as barriers to economic and societal acceptance. The members of a society are instead judged on how agreeably and satisfactorily they live their lives, honor their contracts, both written and unwritten, and produce and trade their goods and services. If you think about how the state, and not just the United States, but all modern states, have classified and divided people by age, it demonstrates the sheer hatefulness and dehumanization that statism is known for. Through the age of 18, children are dependents and basically made to be slaves in preparation to pay taxes for a limited working life. After age 65, the state has termed human beings again as dependents, and as with the young people, not considered productive or particularly valuable. When I think of George Washington, the first of the post-constitutional convention presidents, I don't think of him as chopping down a cherry tree. I think of him as the 16-year-old surveyor's apprentice, traveling with his employer, making maps and surveys of land throughout Virginia and West Virginia, over the very land I now call home. In an era where the life expectancy for free men was around 54 years, George Washington was fighting for secession from the British Empire and eventually serving as president until he was 65 years old. Today, the U.S. life expectancy is about 78, and by the standards set by our first president, we should expect productive and valuable goods and services from Americans through the age of 93. On the other side, the state demands children and teenagers sit quietly in their seats instead of sailing around the world, flying or driving or starting companies. Even as we marvel at what teenagers can accomplish, the state and its minions generally tut-tut and frown when they act on their natural abilities to produce, to think, and to act. As a state, we forbid and denigrate the idea that a productive life should begin in or before one's teens and should end in our 90s. As a free society, we would celebrate this potential and realize it as a matter of course. The first step in living free is orienting our own thinking to liberty. This means we must begin with our own perception of the world, our own knowledge of how free markets, free choice, free movement, and free speech work. We ought to learn a bit about what the great minds throughout history have had to say about freedom, about challenging the Goliaths of the world, and about truth and honor in their personal lives. I mention these three things specifically because I do not believe that living free means rejecting our religious heritage, no matter what that heritage is. All great religions value honesty, courage, and personal responsibility. For many of us, this first step means that we need to read a bit more, study a bit more, listen a bit more, and be open to learning something that will be very different than what we have been taught in government schools and by government institutions, and often by our own families and cultures. I would specifically recommend the Mises Institute, but the whole world of thinking on liberty is available on the internet, and you can watch, read, listen to, and benefit from thinkers who have already paved the way for all of us. I think the second thing that we can do to begin to live free is also something that all people already exhibit: a certain degree of neuroticism, or as it is sometimes characterized, low emotional intelligence and less developed interpersonal skills. To live free in a free society requires us to have more emotional intelligence and better developed interpersonal skills, i.e., to be less neurotic, less fearful, and less pessimistic. These are the gifts of a trader, the talents of a deal maker. A neurotic personality complains that no one wants to buy my products. The less neurotic personality finds out why and figures out something new and better to do. If we are to support ourselves and eliminate the nanny state that we all hate, we need to develop our emotional intelligence and our interpersonal skills, and in doing this, we begin to recognize not only the inherent value of all the people we meet and work with and trade with, but our own inherent value. And that leads to self-confidence, and a self-confident person is well-suited to liberty. Arnold Kling's suspicion that libertarians are a bit low on the agreeableness trait, at least in politics, may have merit. And if you already disagree with the state and refuse to budge, knowing that the state is not only evil but an aggressive evil, you're doing just fine. In a truly free society, we will all be at this point, and we will guard against statist thinking in our homes and public spaces as much as we guard against ourselves and loved ones from contagious diseases and drug-resistant bacteria. But to be disagreeable in politics and really anywhere requires that you understand and are able to emotionally and or intellectually explain why you are opposed. This requires some work, some education, some practice, and it requires some basic principles that you live by, which I think for libertarians and many others should be the Ron Paul campaign theme: peace, prosperity, and liberty. I will divulge here a bit to criticize the Libertarian Party, self-proclaimed party of principle. A significant minority of libertarians, including some influential and popular politicians within the party, happen to be pro-war. They praise the state for marshaling soldiers and building bombs to kill people in other states, for some state-defined rationale that is consistent only in its variability over time. Of course, supporting state wars, especially given what we now know about the ways states go to war and justify those wars throughout history, is inconsistent with freedom. The state's language gives us a clue, because it generally puts forth that the state is always fighting for freedom rather than extinguishing it, which is what a wartime state does both at home and abroad. I believe the state abuses the language this way because human beings were designed to exercise and intuitively love real liberty. A liberty-minded person should encourage his or her friends and neighbors, if those friends or neighbors were advocating that the state act on the behalf of this or that just cause at home or abroad, to review the Christian parable of Jesus and the young wealthy man. We should advise our friends and neighbors in their passion for justice to take the whole of their property and give it away for the cause. They don't even have to go that far. They could perhaps send money, weapons, or aid. But certainly, if they advocate an intervention by our state, they should not wait, but instead immediately travel to the distant land or domestic city, take up arms or aid, and fight the good fight. A statist instead would say, well, let's tax and take a bit from everyone, and then send a few young men who can't otherwise get jobs or have been infused with a false patriotism and blind obedience by their families and state-funded education to go fight for us. The individual cost will be low, and we can all feel like we're doing something. And a statist is illogical about the destruction of property. He or she believes that rebuilding or fixing damaged structures and people, whether it is the foreigners we want to change or the injured and maimed and mentally fractured soldier we want to heal afterwards, is productive. They see no difference between that and the alternative, where the same capital would have been channeled into creating and building more, new, and better things. A statist doesn't think about the insanity of their reasoning. Like babies playing peekaboo, statists haven't yet learned that even when you can't see something right in front of you, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. As Bastiat explained, there are costs we can see and those we can't, and both types of costs matter and must be considered in understanding our choices and actions. If we have developed a certain preparedness of mind, a certain openness to liberty, if we have worked on our interpersonal skills, increased our fundamental sense of optimism about ourselves and others, gained self-confidence, and if we understand logically and historically why we hate the state, we are already living liberty in an unfree world. At this point, we haven't done a thing but open our minds, discipline our thinking towards logic and analytical thinking, and attempted to love people even as we hate vertical and force-based institutions. We have not yet changed or directed our attention to changing any other person, much less attempted to change or weaken the state. Or have we? We are social creatures, and society is made up of individuals who flavor the soup whether they are trying to or not. I would submit to you that living free can be achieved by only these three basic mental steps, and while they seem like easy steps, they are not. Having an effective level of openness, a high degree of self-confidence, and serious depth of understanding of why we love liberty and hate the state will allow us to act freely and to teach others by our interactions, our work, and our example. But it isn't easy, and it's a long road for most. But it is a most worthwhile goal. Liberty-minded people are extremely hard for the state to control. They make terrible soldiers and impolitic generals. They ask a lot of questions, and they listen carefully to the answers, attuned to falsehood and fallacy. I spoke earlier about ageism in the state. Liberty-minded people are a bit like teenagers, and like teenagers, they tend to feel things a bit more powerfully, to imagine things a bit more colorfully, and to love truth a bit more fearlessly than their parents. It is often said that teenagers don't really understand mortality, and they take risks that other sectors of society don't take, emotional and physical risks. They challenge authority. If we are even a little bit liberty-minded, we will do all these things, and we will refuse and resent vertical organization and control. The state, like an angry parent, will be upset, but we will cope with that anger, brush it off, and do it our way. Perhaps Kling was correct after all in his assessment that libertarians are low on agreeableness. If we develop liberty-loving minds, we will certainly be seen by the state to be disagreeable. Is there a cost involved? We could be harassed, economically punished, and condemned. We will be asked hard questions by both the apparatus of the state and by our society and community. But for the liberty-loving mind, these are not roadblocks. The questions are opportunities to practice our tactics, improve our strategies and our effectiveness, and strengthen our resolve. We wonder, how can we live free when the state is a massive, powerful enemy of freedom, and the only effective political mechanism is not rule of law, but an iron triangle between lawmakers, the bureaucracy of state, and favored industries or groups? But, as with so many other questions we could ask, there's an answer we want to hear, and then there is the honest answer. We want to hear that we could live free if only we could eliminate the state, or make it more libertarian. Eliminating the state when most of our neighbors believe in it and rely upon it would only lead to the rise of a subsequent state, possibly one that is even worse and less free. Making the state libertarian, while most of our neighbors believe in and obey state power, would corrupt both libertarians and the very concept of liberty. The honest answer is we have to start with ourselves, and we have to practice living liberty in such a way that it informs, inspires, and ultimately induces our neighbors to turn their own backs on the state. Etienne de la Boétie realized that all states, kings and dictators, democracies and republics rest on the consent of the ruled. In each moment and in the myriad of ways that human beings reject the state, lose faith in the state, and withhold their consent, we achieve liberty, and we proportionally destroy the power of the state. It happened to Rome and to Moscow. It's happening today in Egypt and Tunisia, Libya, Yemen, and Bahrain. It is happening in the United States, too, not in an organized or vertical way, but by the cumulative daily acts of liberty in mind, body, and economy of millions of people. To live free, we need only to greet them, commend them, and join them. And that's the written parts of my presentation. And what I want to do now, if I can, is go to the chat, and I don't see any chat here, so let me try to reload and see if I can make this work. Okay. Okay, I do see chat now. Okay, I do see chat now. And I do see chat now. Sorry about that. Okay. Let's see. We've got questions here. I'm going to start at the bottom of my screen and see if I've got a question here that I can speak to. Control of money, control of the population, power and death, the culture of death. Let's see here. Oh, here's a great compliment. Drew Freeman. I don't know you, Drew, but this is sounding like something Scott Horton might write. He's one of my heroes, and I have to say he's one of my heroes, too. So, great. That is a huge compliment to me, and thank you, Drew, for putting that. Okay, Drew has another thing. I don't think most statists think about their actions as violence or laws of unintended consequences, and it's probably true that they don't, and part of our job would be to try to help them understand that they are. Joe O'Donnell, without education, the state will just keep getting reborn. Drew Freeman, how long was that written as an article? Okay, what do you mean? How many pages? Or how long ago was it written? I'm asking a question back of Drew. Okay, pages. Okay, the pages were not single spaced, but it was not double spaced either, and it was 13 pitch, and I believe it was 10.5 pages. Too long? Was that too long? Oh, huh. Well, you know, Carol, I have a question here from Carol, and you can see it. How about being an LP candidate for president in 2012? Oh, Drew, thanks for saying it's not too long, because maybe I thought it might have been. Maybe I went too fast. Who knows? But to Carol's question, you know, I'm not overly comfortable with political races, but I will say this: I have been talked into here in the 6th District of Virginia, which is the Upper Shenandoah Valley. I have been talked into basically putting my name in the hat, or my hat in the ring, as they say, to be a representative and really to challenge the current incumbent. He is a Republican, and I'm, you know, if you have to go right and left, I'm you know, Tea Party or, you know, Libertarian, that kind of thing. But the majority of the people in the 6th District are Republicans, so I'm running, I think right now, we think we're running as a Republican. We're certainly going to push the incumbent into a liberty-minded campaign himself, because our campaign already is liberty-minded. And I have to tell you, I know I'm running on here on this question, and I didn't even answer it. The LP candidate for president, no, it's too much for me, and I don't think I'm the right person. But on this lower level race, this 6th District race, it is very interesting to see already in just a few short weeks how the incumbent, our current 6th District representative, how he has already adapted his language to include the term liberty. He probably doesn't even know what it means, and he's never used it before, but he's using it now. It's very interesting, and I personally think it is because we've made a case about it. So already, if nothing else, it's kind of made a difference. But oh well, it'll be fun. If anyone who tracks my status or is interested in what I'm doing, that's something that I am going to be doing over the next year and a half, or yeah, a year and a half. Next year and a half, I'm going to be kind of dedicating myself to at least education and moving around a little bit in the 6th District and talking about liberty and talking about some of the same things that I've talked about here. Okay, oh, Carol, thanks. Good start. Okay, now, I missed a question. Oh, Drew, okay, your question about the length. This speech or whatever, I will send it to Lou Rockwell. He will probably post it, and I know also that the Agora Unconference will put together this to be available, not just the video, but the written words. So if you wanted to, like, look at it word for word and see if there's anything you could use in there, that's perfectly fine. Joe had a question. What do you think are the chances for state nullification of, what do you think the chances are for state nullification of Obamacare and state use of gold money to work? Well, this is great. I don't know, Joe, I don't know if you're a Virginian or not. You can tell me later, I guess, but last night I went to a Ronald Reagan birthday dinner sponsored by the GOP of Shenandoah County, and they had the State Attorney General for Virginia, Ken Cuccinelli, and he has had a serious amount of success in countersuing or suing the federal government, specifically on the unconstitutionality of Obamacare. He talked a lot about it last night, very interesting stuff. He also used the word liberty quite a bit, but he was, I thought, much more sincere than some of the other Republicans. He seemed to actually believe it. In terms of currency, we have another Virginian, and he's made national news, delegate from a county, a few counties over from here, and he, Bob Marshall, and he put together a proposal that was rejected by the leadership in Richmond. But his proposal was that a group of a variety of people be put together to look at exactly that state coinage of funds and this state coinage of currency, gold, silver, that kind of thing. He wasn't specific. He just thought a group should look at it in preparation for the collapse or disintegration of the Fed, which would be a very happy day, and I thought he's really smart to project that. Now, there's a lot of denial going on. A lot of people believe in the central bank. They believe in printing money, and they believe in borrowing. So, and that includes a lot of Republicans, so we got a problem. Okay, let me... Okay, well, let's see if I missed something here. Okay, non-participation is... Here's a long question from Rudolph. But how do you balance morality and pragmatism when the state detects your non-participation and threatens your person or property in order to coerce your participation? Okay, well, Rudolph, good question. That is a personal decision, and I think it changes as you go through your life and you have different roles in your life. If you have a family with small children and they're depending on you financially, if you get thrown into jail because you are going to spit in the face of an all-powerful state, then certainly it's your choice, but there's going to be different costs for you than there would be for you in 30 years, or than there would have been for you if you were a teenager. So you have to look at where you are in your life and what you can do. I personally think that there's a very good role for retreat. Okay. In fact, we didn't win. We didn't win the War of Secession against the Crown all those years ago, except for we knew when to run and we knew when to shoot. So I think it's important to not have false pride or false courage, but to really continue the fight in every way that you can and use your own judgment. There are people who will be sacrificed, and right now on my mind is Brad Manning, who I believe is being sacrificed, and by the state, and to strike fear into everyone else. And I think it's a terrible criminal thing. It may be that that's his historical role, and I don't like to think that, but anyway, it has to be a personal choice, and I wouldn't condemn anybody for whatever they do. I just want them to love liberty. Okay, there's another question here from Joyce. Do you believe that political means are the best way to liberty? And I don't. I don't believe political means, because I see politics as a vertical and force-based. It could be that my interpretation of politics is incorrect, that politics doesn't have to be vertical, it doesn't have to be force-based, but in my mind it is. And I have to tell you this, when I found out that every political party in the United States and most of the ones around the world call their top boardroom type organization a central committee, even the Libertarian Party calls its organization at the top a central committee, it is it's a bit contrary. Certainly voting is kind of fun. I look at it as kind of gambling. But I think the best way to liberty is it starts in a person's heart, and it extends out through their actions, through their lives, through their family, through their choices. I don't really see politics as being that. However, the example of Ron Paul, who engages in politics, he's made just fantastic, massive change and awareness and growth of liberty and the love of liberty in this country. So, I don't. It's a hard question, really, that you've asked, Joyce. Politics or governance? Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, maybe it's governance that's vertical. But politics, my experience with it, and I think you see that with the big parties, like the GOP or the Democrats, there is a tendency to consolidate and to converge. In the Republican Party, and we saw a little bit of it just last night in the local GOP when they're having their birthday dinner, there was a division between Tea Party Republicans, between establishment Republicans, and between conservatives who were there who were really neither Tea Party or establishment, but were looking for what they believe the GOP should be about. And one of those is going to have to win. Let's hope it's either Tea Party or the non-establishment, that it's somebody other than the establishment Republicans. But there seems to be a convergence. Whenever you're in a group, you've got a little bit of groupthink and that kind of thing. So I'm a little afraid of them. But okay, Joe has a question. What are your thoughts on the Air Force getting a contract to make fake? Oh yeah, I haven't heard that, but my God. I think Facebook, it should be buyer beware. Certainly, you're going out on Facebook. I mean, I have 3 Facebook accounts that I know of. There may be another one. It's two that I use for different purposes. So, I don't know. I would be scared of it. I would believe it. It doesn't sound unreasonable to me that they would get a contract to make fake Facebook identities. Doing disinformation, the government doing disinformation and using whatever technology is out there to do it is there's a long history of that. In fact, it really reveals the weakness in the state, particularly now in the United States, that they feel they have to do that. They understand that they're losing control and they need to do this. So yeah, it's part of the battlefield. We have to be aware of it. Yeah, Drew has said, unfortunately, one of them will win in the GOP. Yeah, that is true. And I haven't watched closely the presidential race at all. I know Newt Gingrich, the great neoconservative establishment Republican, is interested, real interested in being president. He has wanted that kind of power for probably since he was a tiny boy. And he's not popular. He is just not popular amongst the people. He's an establishment guy. He's a fake guy. He lost all credibility in 1994. Because they didn't do what they promised to do. He says the right things, but he follows up with nothing but the same stuff. So, but these guys he wants to be president. And then you've got Donald Trump. I still can't even imagine that is for real. That Donald Trump thinks that. But he is a perfect example of an establishment candidate. And all I can say is if he gets elected, I'm not paying attention to anything he does. I'm not going to obey him. I mean, and I think most people would feel that way. So the more we practice this contempt for the state and the contempt for the state's politicians, that'll be a good thing. Okay, Joe's posted a link to Trump, you're fired. That's right. Joe, thanks for posting that link to the Why Does the Air Force Want Hundreds of Fake Online Identities and Social Media. And also, I don't doubt at all, we know that the FBI and police departments create fake identities on social media all the time in order to entrap and trap any number of criminals, whether they be people trying to hire other people to kill people or child molesters, all this, they're very much into it. And I understand that it is legal, actually legal for a law enforcement, now didn't say it's military, but a law enforcement officer can lie to a person in custody. They can say, yeah, your mother told you need to confess so you can get out of here, that kind of thing. So, this is extending to the Air Force, conducting surveillance and under false representation to the actual people of this country. It's really a sign of the franticness and the fearfulness of the state and the militarization of the state as well. But I think that's pretty common, and I imagine several people have talked about that at this conference already. Joyce, I like anyone who seeks power can't possibly be trusted with it. I really do believe that that's true. And it's not, if you want to start your own company, you want to be the head of your business and you want to have control over that, or you want to, remodel a house and you want to be in charge of the everything that gets done, that's one thing, because you're looking at power over what you own. But political power is unearned power over all kinds of things that you don't own, and it's actually something kind of sinful about it. So yeah, it's a rare politician like Ron Paul that can really walk that minefield, that moral and ethical minefield that it is to be a politician. And of course, it's because Ron Paul has done it, there can be other people like that who do it. But it is rare, and that's sad. Okay, Howard Howe has a question. Karen, what is your understanding and position on the income tax, which is really a trust fund tax? Well, I'm not familiar with the trust fund tax, but I think the income tax is kind of wrong. But I'm not an expert on it, and I don't like it. And the government, the government needs money. Where else is it going to get it? It's going to get it from the sheep. And certainly the truly wealthy folks and wealthy companies, as we've noticed with the General Electric being in the news just recently about how many taxes they pay. It's the common average people that are going to get stuck funding this terrible, awful state that all states are, and ours included. So it's wrong, but I can't give you a good, educated, legal precedent type answer on that because I'm just not that well informed. Oh, Michael, you've pointed out even Ron Paul earmarks. Exactly so. Yes. He does. And part of Ron Paul is actually very good in his district out there in Jackson. He's very good at bringing home the things that his constituents want from the public till, from the collective wealth stealing that is the federal government. And Joyce has made a point here, and this I cannot verify, but it seems that you say that Ron Paul's backed off of his end the Fed campaign now that he has some power over it. I haven't observed that, but you know, I don't know. I do not know. But I can tell you one thing. He certainly popularized the awareness of the Fed, a desire to audit the Fed, and ultimately end it amongst many, many people. And there are a number of other politicians who are not even libertarians, I don't think. Certainly they're not running as libertarians. I mean, many libertarians are running on this too, but there are a lot of mainstream politicians that fear the Fed, understand the danger of a central bank to untrammeled central government power, and you know, that are basically picking up the Ron Paul banner on that. So maybe Ron Paul feels, I don't know, just suggesting, maybe he feels that it's got the momentum, and he doesn't have to be maybe as abrasive or out in public on it. I just don't know. I'm totally speculating here, but certainly Ron Paul educated so many people, and the Fed is a major point of conversation in actual newspapers all over the web. People understand how it works, and that's the beginning of the end for the Fed, no matter how long it takes. It will definitely end at some point. I like your end Congress thing, Michael. That's good. End Congress, absolutely. I personally think we don't need, you know, I hate to say it, but I think the size of the 50 states as they are, 51 if you count Israel, I think, you know, it's pretty big. We got 310 or so million people. The economy of some of the states, California comes to mind before it crashed, and even now it has a large economy. You know, it's much larger than many republics and other very nice little countries all around the world. So I see no reason that the future would not hold much less of a role for central government, and possibly even peaceful separation and independence of one or many sections of this country from Washington. If Washington gets to the point where they can't borrow any money, and they try to take it through force, and they can't do that either because it just, you know, it doesn't work. We will turn our backs on Washington, because too many people in this country have no love for Washington, and they do not want to support and pay for it. And if we stop paying for it, you know, you want to end Congress, we'll stop paying for it. And we may be forced into into ceasing that just because of financial collapse, which of course was brought on precisely by that same group of people and their central bank and the policies that they followed. Okay, let me see if I've missed some. Joseph, it's better for the Fed to be seen as falling apart itself, or else libertarians might get blamed for the upcoming economic collapse. Yeah, well, luckily, the libertarians, actual self-identified libertarians, are a small number. So it would be a very paranoid country that would blame the libertarians, as you know, as Mary Ruart pointed out earlier today, that they're not gathering a huge amount of actual votes. So it would be tough for them to blame libertarians on that. And actually, another benefit of Ron Paul and the Tea Party is that we're pointing the finger in the right direction. We are pointing it at the federal government and the Fed. So that's great. I don't think libertarians will get blamed for the upcoming economic collapse. I think they won't. They will not get blamed. And it's a great educational opportunity as we go through and go towards that, if indeed that is coming. Okay, debt skyrocketing. Okay. Well, Drew makes a good point. They're only understanding because debt is skyrocketing, banks have collapsed. Yeah, that's part of it. Yep, for sure. And when times get hard, you want to blame somebody. Let's just make sure they blame the state, because that's the proper and correct place to point the finger of blame. Okay. What have I missed here? The relationship in many Zionists and they hate. Oh, okay. From an American and Israeli perspective, the relation is highly complex, and many Zionists and Israelis oppose American relations, such as foreign aid, myself included. Well, good for you. I agree with you. In fact, if you really want to talk honestly about Israel and America and the relations and the role and the relationship of the AIPAC lobby, which is an American lobby, that ostensibly pushes Israel's policies, but oftentimes it pushes policies that Israel wants them to stop pushing. Yeah. There is, if you want a free conversation, you should go to Israel and have it, because they talk freely about it. It's very strange in this country that we are not able or less able to really talk about the role of the lobby, the Israeli lobby in particular, and in our foreign policy. And I think Rand Paul got a little taste of this, when he was going to cut the foreign aid, proposing all foreign aid to be cut. And they asked him, "What do you mean, Israel?" And he said, "Yes. I mean, why not? I mean, this is a principle thing." And people got very upset. But again, I'll tell you what I understand from AIPAC is it's filled with a bunch of old men, and they're young people. Well, there just aren't that many young people in AIPAC. So again, a dying organization, a dying lobby, and a different America that maybe is not as interested in interfering. Maybe by default, our country will pull back a little and become more like George Washington might have wanted, and become less entangled in the foreign policy. Now, having said that, we just did the Libya thing. I don't know what that was about, but it's still going on, and now they're projecting months and months of it. Oh, Rand Paul defends Israel. I haven't read that. I know during his campaign he came across as pretty positive, but I like what he's doing now in the Senate. I think within the framework of our political system, our Congress system, I think he's doing a pretty fair job. I have to say that. That's just my opinion. I haven't followed it every single way, but I like a lot of what he's doing. Okay, Mark. Oh, hi, Mark. And I didn't realize you came back on this at the beginning. But have you discussed your thoughts on the recent active descent on North Africa? I haven't really. I haven't. Mikey's comment on the toilets is funny. Okay, I'm sorry, Mark. I haven't talked much about North Africa, but I do think that these people. It's a combination of frustration, economic frustration. I mean, the commodity prices have impacted North Africa, Middle East, all kinds of places around the world who really are already spend a significant amount of their low incomes on food, as all low-income people do. You're going to spend more on food, and they've been impacted terribly by both years of socialist despotism in their countries, and overregulation, which is part of socialism, and this terrible spike in energy and commodity prices, particularly commodity and food prices. So they're very, 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 very angry. And these people they understand their governments. Tunisians understood Ben Ali. They knew where he came from. They knew the history. They knew it inside out. We didn't. It's not our job to do that. If the State Department doesn't do their job, it would be their job to do that. They didn't get it either. The people in Tunisia understood Ben Ali, and they put up with him until everything else got so bad. And then kind of this overflow. And same with Egypt. You think they have a clue about Mubarak? I mean, yes, sure, reading things about how these dictators enrich themselves and steal from the state and how unsavory they are, sure. That adds to the fire. But Egyptians knew what they had with Mubarak. They knew it very, very well. Many of them had personal relations with the security apparatus, etc., etc. So, it's a long time coming, I think, set off in large part by economic crisis, and in part, global commodity prices and inflation are set off in part because the United States, money printing policy. There is a connection there, but I don't think they're doing an American-style thing at all. I think it's coming from the heart, and I don't think it's going to. I don't call it a revolution. I don't call anything that's going on there a revolution. It's rebellions and evolution, and most likely most of those countries, thanks to our interference in some of them, and certainly we're supporting the Bahrain royal family, and we're supporting the Yemen guy because he's let us do so much stuff in his country. We're involved in a negative way. We will not come out of these revolutions looking good. We are already identified with the enemy. We're identified with most of these puppets or dictators that we supported, that we gave aid to, and we work with militarily. So, but I think they're doing it. I think technology has helped because they're understanding in real terms and in speedy and fast real-time terms the nature of their own power. And that's a really good thing. So it's very nice to see it, although your heart breaks for the danger that these people are putting themselves in and the sacrifices. But that's how you got to take your country back. And so I wish them well, but I wish the United States would totally stay out of those things. And again, if we could stop the foreign and military aid and bring the bases, eliminate those foreign bases, and bring those guys home, and decommission all this, most of the military, we would be in good shape. We would really be in good shape. Oh, I can go on as long as I please. Thanks, George. I know, because I'm at the end of the day. Okay. Okay, Joe has a question. How soon will Obama's assertion that he can execute Americans at will using UAVs be used in the U.S.? How soon? In the U.S.? Oh, my goodness. Well, I don't know. I don't know, but I think that some of the, we have this sense of a global, how NSA is not supposed to listen to Americans, and if they get a call between an American and a foreign person overseas, that they have to, by law, go back and eliminate the American citizen side of the conversation, right? And this is a big problem when I worked at NSA. This was a big concern. Well, how do they do that? It's very difficult because electronics and communication technology bounces all over the globe. So what is the difference between national and international? Well, it's blurred together. And certainly Obama is, along with Clinton and all these other one world type globalists, that everything should, let's all have one set of laws that we live under and no real sovereignty nationally. Certainly no individual sovereignty will be tolerated. So given that their perception is the whole world is their oyster, I would think that if there's spikes or outbreaks of rejection of the state in various parts of this country, or maybe they'll do it against criminals or perceived criminals, maybe they'll use it in the drug war, that would be very convenient, that if he says he can execute Americans at will using UAVs, as he has done in Yemen, and I believe in maybe Afghanistan as well, probably Pakistan too, what would stop him? I mean, the real question is, what would stop him? And I think nothing. I think nothing would stop him. And so that's very much a dangerous thing. In fact, I have to tell you, I live out in the country, and we get flyovers, training flyovers of fighter planes, and sometimes we see military transport planes come over, and every once in a while we see military helicopters flying slower than what we're comfortable with. And, they're just going somewhere. I'm sure they're not doing anything. But it makes me think that the capability of our own state to conduct formal military violence against us is it will be easy. And if it's easy, these executives and politicians will do it. And I don't think Congress would protect anyone, because they roll over and don't, except for a very few of them, they don't even know what's in the Constitution and do not feel a dedication to the Constitution, so they don't really see their role as standing up against the executive. So yeah, it could happen. It'll probably happen in my lifetime, and I expect to live for a while, so let's hope it's at the end of my lifetime when that happens. A few stingers in the barn sounds good, yeah. Yeah, I like Howard. I like what you said about charity begins at home. It does, and that's where also real accountability always is anyway, is close to home, and that's why I kind of had in the talk the way I did it. I think it really, it's not as satisfactory. It's not as satisfactory to think that everything that I can do is just in my own sphere of self, family. Neighborhood, community, but that's where you make the difference. That is where you make the difference in the lives that you personally touch, and it's a harder work because you're accountable for it. If you improve, you're accountable. If you become a hypocrite in your own personal life, yeah, you're accountable for that. But yeah, charity, the best charity is the charity that no one knows about. That is you meeting the need of a person. Maybe you know, maybe you don't, but it's going to be someone that touches your life, I think, anyway. So I do agree with that. Fibonacci, charity, and agorism. Okay, thanks, Michael, for sharing that. I haven't looked at it yet. I don't really want to bounce away. FibonacciFinancial.com. Looks good. Are there any other questions or concerns that I can bring up to you, or I can maybe talk about? I don't know how. I certainly don't have all the answers, that's for sure. Is the ordinary American seeing that Obama is backing a dictator one day and rebels the next? Well, that a no-fly zone means to bomb the heck out of the place. War is peace. Yeah, it's very strange. I read just yesterday that the anti-war Bush criticizer who was on MSNBC and still is, who is the lady that's on there? I know everybody knows who I'm talking about. I can't remember her. Very much on Bush's case about exactly what you're talking about here, the hypocrisy, the deadliness, war is peace. And now she backs Obama. So politics trumps logic and consistency and honesty. So politics trumps it. And you're seeing the same trumping of politics. Rachel Maddow, thank you very much. Yes, Rachel has come out in support of Obama's war. The Republicans, back when Clinton was bombing and no-fly zoning and doing all kinds of stupid things over in the Balkans, all humanitarian. In fact, that was the first humanitarian war. And the Republicans got on his case about that. Of course, when Bush was elected, they weren't on his case. So when Clinton does it, for Democrats it was okay, the Republicans didn't like it. But when the Republicans did it, then the Democrats don't like it, but the Republicans do like it. So they've revealed their true core lack of a fundamental value system. They've revealed what they're really about, which is groupthink and group behavior, following the crowd. And in my mind, if you support a war, any war, it makes you a murderer. And unfortunately, this is the real problem with having your tax dollars and other wealth going in part to funding these wars. I mean, the people who, with abortion, there's a real sensitivity to, if you oppose abortion, you are very sensitive about your tax dollars being used to pay for what in your mind is a murder of a human being. And yet those very same people and many, many others have no such qualms about their tax dollars being used to bomb people that they don't know and that never did a thing to us, including children and including pregnant women. So huge inconsistency there. And I again, logically clarifying where you're coming from, all Americans would do better if they did that. I think the liberty-loving crowd is better at this logic, and we understand it maybe quicker than the rest of the country. But we've got to push that on everybody because it's a problem, and the problem is us. You can't technically blame that on the state. That is in the mindset of many Americans. Mark has a question. Karen, in your opinion, what are the most important federal government policies that need to be resisted and opposed? Okay. Well, I really think that the central bank is it is the enabler, and Lou Rockwell's written a number of good articles on this, and of course Ron Paul too, but the central bank, the Fed, the Federal Reserve, is the enabler of the continued growth of the state. I mean, there isn't enough tax revenue to support everything that they're doing. They borrow money to go conduct all these things, and they borrow money through the mechanism of the Federal Reserve, making money available to be borrowed and buying up debt. So, big problem. So I think it sounds not very urgent, but I think a collapse or destruction of the central bank is got to be one. Now, federal government policies that need to be resisted and opposed that may touch our lives, I have to say, from my perspective, just as a Virginian, EPA overreach, basically making executive regulation into law, into executable law, that is a huge problem. And the EPA does that a lot, and they're getting in legal trouble. They're being sued, and they're being pushed back against. That's one. Department of Education, I would love it. I would love to have no public schooling, but if the first step on that is something Ronald Reagan promised to do but failed to do, and that was to get rid of the Department of Education. We certainly don't need a Department of Energy, and this Obamacare, what do they call it? It's called, I guess, I don't know what the official name is for it, Health Freedom, Health Something Act, but Obamacare, in that it touches people's pocketbooks directly, is another great opportunity for individuals to basically say, I'm not doing that. I am not doing that, and I refuse to do that. And really, they cannot throw all the people who don't want to pay the penalty and who don't want to buy what the government is telling them to buy, they won't be able to throw us in jail unless they end the drug war. And there's another one. We ought to get rid of the drug war. So if that's something that's in a person's purview, where they're interested in that, or medical marijuana, promoting freedom in terms of food and that kind of thing, that's another thing to fight back on. But I think it depends on what touches you as far as where you're going to fight back the most, because the best fighter is the one who knows the terrain and knows the enemy, and that will be different for each of us. Let me go back because there's a few more questions that I missed. Hold on a second here, because I want to go from the bottom up. Bitcoin, I have heard of it, don't know much about it, Jason. Money creation, most important issue. Favorite government program. Favorite government program. Gosh, trying to think. I am truly, I have to tell you, I'm the beneficiary of government. I was in the military for 20 years. I am a beneficiary of huge government programs. But that doesn't make them my favorite, and I'm trying to think if I do have a favorite. There's got to be something, because I'm not treating this as a trick question. I'm treating this as something I should be able to. Okay, I'll have to get back to you, because there's probably something that I could honestly say, oh, I like that, but nothing is coming to mind right now. I'm pretty hateful, I guess, when it comes to the state, but I'm sure that I could probably give you a question that, well, that one. Now, Bernard von Nuthouse, Joyce's question, he's the guy, Asheville, North Carolina, very close. I grew up in Brevard, which is about 25 miles away from Asheville. I know Asheville pretty well. They threw him in jail and declared him to be a domestic terrorist because he dared to, I don't know, he's making silver coins, and they're not coins, they're medallions or whatever. I don't know. They accused him of violating the law. They being the federal attorney, I guess, in North Carolina. Really, really awful language. I think that case, and I do feel sorry for him. I think it was wrong. That's a travesty of justice. But I think in a larger sense, what they did, at least so far, I'm sure he's going to be able to appeal. But what they did to Bernard, in terms of his guilt and his potential incarceration, because he's not guilty of anything constitutionally, but what they've declared him to be, I think it indicates a real worry, a real concern on the part of the state about this whole movement to sound money, and this whole rejection of the legitimacy of the state. And that legitimacy is communicated most personally through currency, through the state-issued currency, which of course is worthless, and everybody knows it. So this whole trend is chipping away at state credibility, and the fighting back and the very viciousness and the very use of the vicious language against Nothouse, referring to him as a non-violent domestic terrorist. I mean, oh my goodness, that's just crazy. This is a sign of the how close the state really is, or how close it fears that it is, to real danger from the people in having us withdraw our consent. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's all going to get free right away, but I think it is a sign of the state's fear. Yes, I know, Joyce. He was told it was legal, and that's why I don't understand. I haven't read a lot about the specific arguments that were made in that case, and I was very shocked to find that they found him guilty. And Michael von Nuthouse was attacked to put the fear of God in us. Yeah, well, the same reason Bradley Manning is kept in prison, naked and isolated with the lights on 24/7. They'll destroy his mind and his life, and to take away his freedom, and in part for to put the fear of God, put the fear of the state in the people. But the fact that they're trying more drastically to make us scared, I think, is a sign that it realizes their days are numbered. What would be effective strategies for the grassroots to prevent a non-establishment winner from becoming established in the same manner? Oh gosh. Well, okay. I don't know about one effective strategy. There may be many. I'll tell you this: if you keep in contact with them, with the elected person, I think that you can help keep them a little bit straight. The big problem with government and the idea that politicians become establishment politicians, is that the federal government, the Congress, has access to other people's money that they can throw this way and that way, to this friend, to this supporter, to this group, and away from this other group. So they're playing, they're distributing wealth, they're redistributing wealth, and this is a power trip, of course, and it gives them a sense of being somebody, being contenders, and they of course they can't do it freely. They have to conform to the establishment position. So very much of a temptation for these new guys, particularly the Tea Party, and I think right now, what is it, 4/5 of all the elected people that ran as Tea Party non-establishment candidates, only about 1/5 of them have really held to their principles, and that's just in a short period of time, several months of being in office. So strategy-wise, you could stay on top of them. You could cut the government's funding, whether it's done by forces outside our control or by just other efforts, or not paying your taxes. And a lot of people are already becoming part of the black and gray economy. People are voluntarily reducing their taxable income. They're doing, on a human sense, on a human scale, what General Electric does on a corporate scale. So we can try to take away their money. We can try to stay on top of the individual politicians that we voted for or that we support. I will say this. I know I'm running on here. Last night at this GOP dinner thing, the incumbent that I hope to unseat, or at least to put the fear of God into, he used words that he's never used before in 10 terms. He used words like liberty and freedom and things like that. And he doesn't normally do that. And I do believe that he is being pushed because he already knows what our campaign is about, and our campaign is about liberty. So he's going to try, I think, to move at least linguistically into the area of freedom. So, maybe the words are first and the actions follow. Sometimes that can be. So anyway, maybe that's not a good answer. I don't have a really good strategy, but I think we should keep our eyes open, and if people see what works, we should do more of it. Okay, I'm not familiar with the Manuel Goldstein of 2011. I don't know that. Michael Stoddard, okay, what did you learn working for the NSA that would guide us in protecting our privacy? Well, one thing is I wouldn't ever buy a Microsoft product, and I would try not to patronize any of the major telephone companies that were given immunity from the wiretapping violations that they did under the Bush administration. If it's big, the government has probably got back doors to everything that it does. I would. The other thing I learned is that NSA, and this is not something I learned it when I was at NSA in the mid-90s, but you could learn this from the internet. This is not secret. But NSA has a really tough time with even simple encryptions, open key, public key encryptions like PGP and others. So truly, your work, your writing, your whatever, if you just get in the habit of using encryption for this, which I have to admit, I really don't, you can really make yourself private. To at least from the federal government. And plus, since they're looking at so much, this is the other thing I did see when I was there, and it's become even more of a problem now for NSA, is the sheer incredible volume of what it is they're scooping up and looking through. And of course they have software, they have programs to look through for keywords, but keywords aren't the human touch, and they end up with a lot of really bad, unusable information. So I learned not to be afraid of NSA and not to be in awe of its capabilities, but at the same time to understand that American business and many of, if not most of the overseas communication technologies manufacturers are totally on board. You just might as well be giving it directly to NSA. Unless it's encrypted, and so that's my simple solution. Now there are, if you want to read up on how to become anonymous, there are a number of Lou Rockwell's got a guy that's been giving almost a chapter of a book every week or something on the whole way of becoming electronically or informationally anonymous to anybody that might want to see it. And so we should probably learn these techniques. I think it's going to be important, and stay up with the latest technology, because technology, in the technology spiral, freedom is always going to come first. Then the government later lumbers along and tries to figure out how to crack it. Okay, throw away cell phones? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, throw away cell phones for sure, or no cell phones. But, yeah, throw away. Sounds good. Or I imagine you can get encryption for your phones. I don't see why we wouldn't be able to do that. And I think in time that kind of capability will become more commonplace to have encryption, to encrypt our voice and data transmissions as well through cell phones. Well, actually, it's all the same. Cell phone, computer, it's all integrated. So encryption is probably the one thing you can do, and then from there you can find lots of other things. Let me see here. Oh, he was a domestic terrorist in Orwell's 84. Oh, yeah, that's right. I do remember the guy now. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, okay, good. HTTS certificates. I'm not familiar with them. Sounds good. The Rockwell's awesome. Yes. Learn from the drug dealers. Absolutely. In fact, all of the business always kind of leads the way in innovation, and that includes, in some ways, particularly includes businesses that have been made to be illegal by fiat, by law, by this is no longer legal. So yeah, we should definitely learn from. And I really hate to say this, but a lot of the encryption dynamics and early development of encryption was done by criminals that were dealing in pornography. So they kind of pushed the envelope, but maybe that was a good thing at the time, because now we can benefit from that encryption capability. Yeah, I've heard The Wire's really good. I haven't watched it. The feds encrypt. What does that mean, encrypt? Encrypt the crackberries. Okay, well, I know they're very popular, but that would put them in the same category as any big popular thing. And of course, Blackberries, I know when I was in the Pentagon, were majorly purchased by defense contracts for some of the higher ups. Basically, if you were a colonel or above, you got issued one at one point in the Air Force anyway. They issued them Blackberries. And so if the government is actually issuing its own people a communication technology, you can pretty be sure that it's owned, okay? It's owned totally. I read an article that said anything that can hear cell phone mics even when the phones are off. Yeah, I believe, yeah. Well, if they can hear through the cell phone, they might be able to, but certainly they can track it. Yeah, if you want the thing, you gotta take the battery out. That's what I've heard. I actually can't verify it from a technical sense, but I believe it as a user. I believe it. Okay. Thank you, Joe. I'm glad I solved my sound problem earlier, and that they let me have another time slot. So I'm grateful to George Donnelly and the Agora Stun Conference for doing that, and such a great thing that they've put together. Charles, it says, I remember Obama having to give up his iPhone. I don't know. I don't know. I've always kind of respected Apple for being a little bit, for basically being the un-Microsoft. But Apple's big enough now where I'm not sure they don't totally cooperate with the government as well in terms of those back doors. Yeah, Blackberries are totally pro-government. Okay, well, folks, it's 7:17. We have time. If there are any more questions or things that I can share my views on, I'm happy to do it. I do appreciate y'all being here for sure. And the written speech, if anybody's interested in it, will probably be available at either here or at Lou Rockwell or both. And I know the whole of the Agora Unconference is archived, so people can go back and look at all those great, all those just wonderful speakers. And for me, it's almost like a college education on some of the technology stuff, because I'm a little out of it, considering that I couldn't even get my sound to work right. I'm a little behind the curve on some of this, and there's a lot for me to learn, and I'm going to enjoy looking at the archives. Books I recommend. Yes, Mark, well, I did mention in my talk, and you may have come in late and not heard it, but I mentioned your book, the book you put together, and I've got it right here, Why Liberty. Hopefully you can see that, Why Liberty. It's right here, Personal Journeys Towards Peace and Freedom. I recommend that just because it's current and it reaches out to people who may not already be on board with ideas of libertarianism. Mainly, I think people should read specific books. I like some of Ron Paul's stuff. Not necessarily all of it. I don't particularly care for his collections of speeches, but I like the In the Fed book. I like it when he explains and has a focused story. And he's got a new book coming out. You can check for it on Amazon. It's being pretty well advertised. And it's also about, I think it's 50 ways to, somebody will have to fix me. If they know it, they can type it in there, the name of his new book. But it has to do with freedom and liberty in this country, and 50 ways, I think, to get it or to have it, which would be really interesting for the Agora unconference type audience. It would be good. But basically, I think you should go to websites that you like. I like Mises Institute. I like Lou Rockwell, and see what they're recommending based on what's in the news. And that gives you kind of timely, liberty defined. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you, Rudolph. That's exactly it. No, not 50 ways to leave your life. Liberty defined. You can go on Amazon and pre-order it, and I would highly encourage that people do that. Antiwar.com is another great one, and see what they're talking about. Listen, they interview authors all the time. There's a website, whowhatwhy.com, I think is the website for a guy who's written a lot of books. So if you look, it depends on what you're interested in. But if you go to websites that aim at a freedom and liberty education, particularly like LouRockwell.com or Foundation for Free Economic Education, the Future Freedom Foundation up in Reston, there's just a number of them. Even Cato, if you really, I mean, they're not overly liberty-oriented 100%. They're kind of establishment libertarianism, but they have a lot of things that you might be interested in book-wise. So I don't have specific things. Obviously, I'm assuming that people have read Atlas Shrugged, that people have read some articles or books from some of the Austrian economists. I'm kind of assuming that you've gone there. Okay, I don't get that one. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, and listen to the podcast, the interviews of a lot of the people that are writing and doing things in Liberty right now, because what they're reading is what you ought to be reading, and what they're writing is what you ought to be reading. So I'm pretty big on just sucking as much information about liberty and as many perspectives as possible. Yeah, there you go, Machinery of Freedom. Yeah, and I haven't read that. I met his father. I haven't met him, but I've met his father, and he's an interesting guy. Great. Good recommendation, Mike. Thanks for bringing that up. There actually are lists out there. If you could probably Google lists of books on liberty, you could probably find quite a few things. But I do think we should read, and I don't think it's a sin just to read a part of a book. I don't think you have to finish the book. I think if you can take a little bit from it, that's fine. If you want to read a couple of chapters, that's fine. We got to learn. We got to be smart enough, at least, and logical enough, and have the facts so that we can help other people who don't come from the same place that we're in to understand the dangers and the deadliness of the state and the importance of liberty and the peacefulness of liberty. A lot of people don't believe that liberty is going to be peaceful, but, when people are free, they don't just go around beating everybody up. They really don't. It's a totally different thing. Oh, he has a new revision of Machinery of Freedom. Okay, good. Well, I'll put that on my list of books. For sure, I will. Good. Okay, if there's no more questions that are really, really urgent, I'm going to thank all of you for being here and for hanging in there and, for doing the good work of liberty and freedom. And it's good to see your names. And if I see your names elsewhere, I'll try to remember that I talked to you here in this forum. So that's good. So thank you very much. If there's no more questions in the next 15 seconds, I'm going to go ahead and log on out of there. Okay. Okay. Well, thank all of you. I appreciate it. It's been totally fun, and I'm glad I got a chance to learn how this works, because I got a feeling this is a great little technology for people to connect and to learn from each other. Okay, well, thanks so much, everybody. I'm logging out now. Bye-bye. Thanks, Mark.